Over the next couple of months, if you're going to ask me to recommend you a book, it's very likely to be one of these. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through my top 10 books for 2024. Every single month, I have put aside the best book that I read that month, and I've been taking a look back at the list and kind of trying to put them into an order. It took me a little while and took me a little bit of kind of Tetris playing, but I think I'm happy with the order that I've got it in now. As there are 12 months of the year, but there's only 10 slots in the top 10, I've also got two honourable mentions that just missed out on the top 10 list, but I still think that you should go and check them out anyway. First one of the honourable mentions is Somebody Knows by Michelle McDonough. This is set in Galway. It's one of my favourite places in Ireland, and it is following Cara. Her adoptive mother has just passed away, and this has really spurred her on to go and find out a little bit more about her birth mother. It turns out that Lucia's body was actually found in a bog a couple of years ago, and nobody is quite sure how it was that she ended up there. This book goes into a whole discussion about the mother and baby homes that were rife in Ireland all the way up until the 1990s, and I thought that it was such an interesting social conversation that is definitely going to be happening quite a lot in the next couple of years. I really enjoyed this book. It truly kept me on my seat for the entire time that I was reading it, and while I had guessed some things were going to be happening, and while I had imagined some things that were going to play out, there were a couple of things that really threw me, that I had no idea how any of it was going to play out. And Michelle McDonough is definitely an author I'm going to be checking out again in the future. The second honourable mention is another Irish book, and that is Whatever Happened to Birdie Troy by Rachel English. This has actually just been re-released in a smaller paperback form, and it is now called The Last Song. So if you see that and it sounds quite similar, they're the exact same story. This is following the Diamonds, a rock group that were set up in Ireland back in the 1970s, went on Top of the Pops, had a fantastic show, and then disappeared. Were never seen again. They had never released any other music, and everyone in the band had pretty much disappeared, including Birdie Troy. Nobody has known where she is in the last 30 or so years, and there are so many questions about what has happened to her life. About 30 or so years after that fateful appearance on Top of the Pops, Stacey, who is running a podcast at the moment, is really intrigued by the story of Birdie Troy. She really wants to get to the bottom of what it is that has happened because she really wants to interview Birdie. Her podcast is called Whatever Happened To, and she brings people back who have kind of faded into obscurity and will ask them what they've been getting up to professionally or personally, and just trying to figure out what their life looks like now. I think it's such an interesting concept for a podcast anyway, so seeing it done in the book was so good. But you also see quite a lot of Stacey's relationship with her friend Ronan, and she kind of wants a little bit more to happen from that. But their connection with the band The Diamonds is something that I truly never saw coming. Into the top 10 proper. In the 10th position is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. This was my first book by Tia Williams that I had ever read, but my expectations were really high. I had heard some really good things about 7 Days in June, and that is still on my TBR, but having had such a great time with A Love Song for Ricky Wilde, it's definitely one that's going to be taken off my TBR in 2025. This is about Ricky Wilde, who is not super excited about getting into the family business. Her entire family are in funeral directing, and she's looking for something a little bit different to that. So she leaves their home in Atlanta and she heads off for New York, where she's going to rent a tiny little brownstone in Harlem, and she's going to set up a floral shop. While she is there, she gets to know Miss Della, who is her next door neighbor, and they form a really close and really nice friendship with one another. But she also catches the eye of Ezra, who is a guy that just walks by now and then, but she feels really drawn to him. It turns out that Ezra has his own secrets, and that he has been around for a lot longer than Ricky Wilde was expecting to. I absolutely loved the magical realism of this book. I am getting really into magical realism lately, and this was such a nice way to introduce myself into the concept of it. I had such a great time with this book. There were a couple of things in this book that completely blindsided me, and having thought back about it, I probably should have been a little bit more prepared for what was going to happen. But I fell in love with the writing style of this book. It was so beautifully told, with so much warmth and so much love, that I just know I'm going to have a great time with Tia Williams in the future. In at number 9 is Truly Madly Deeply by Alexandria Bellflour. I have loved every single book that I've read of her so far, so I knew I was in really good hands here. This is following Truly and Colin. Truly is a romance author and Colin is a divorce lawyer. They've both been brought onto a relationships podcast, which is coincidentally hosted by Colin's sister Caitlin, and they're going to be answering some questions that the listeners have sent in. Just so happens that on the day of the recording, Truly has been dumped by her long-term boyfriend, so she's getting a little bit more cynical. So when Colin's answers don't particularly line up with her idea of a perfect romance, she storms out of the studio. She decides that she is not coming back, but he goes after her, he gets her phone number, and he tries to talk her back around. Truly and Colin appear on the podcast again and again because their chemistry between one another, both on and off mic, is absolutely sparkling. They start to learn a little bit more about each other, and Truly starts to really warm up to him. Something that I absolutely loved about this book is the depiction of bisexual characters who are in straight presenting relationships. It is something that is so hugely personal to me in my own life that when Truly and Colin had this discussion with one another and said that your bisexuality is in no way cancelled out by you being in a straight presenting relationship, it just hit me right there. I also really enjoyed reading some of the hijinks with Truly and her family. Her two parents are huge theatre nerds, to the point that they have named their daughter after one of the characters from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But they sit Truly down and tell her that their relationship is starting to fall apart and that they are looking to separate. Truly decides to kind of parent trap her family back together, and there are some hilarious hijinks that happen, but there's also a really nice heart-to-heart conversation that Truly and her parents have that I feel was so needed and so necessary. This book was such a triumph for me. It was such a great romance. The chemistry between these two characters, as I've said, was completely off the scale. The smut was fantastic. It was so well read. I cannot wait to see where Alexandria brings me next. In at number 8 is the first nonfiction on this list, but one that I always find difficult to talk about. That is A Heart That Works by Rob Delaney. This is his story of Henry. Henry was Rob's 2-year-old son who passed away from a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer. As you can imagine, this goes through an entire portion of Henry's short life, about his conception, about his birth, and also about his diagnosis with cancer, the treatment that he would have received, and what happened when they realized that the treatment was no longer working. It is completely heartbreaking. I am not a parent myself, but I can just imagine how much a parent would be affected by reading this book. I can imagine if they've read it that they would be hovering over their child's crib, over their child's bed, wherever it is that they're sleeping, night on night on night for weeks, just hoping and wishing and praying that this isn't something that their family has to go through as well. It's also a beautiful love letter to the NHS, which is the health system in the UK, and all of the people who came and were on Rob and Leah's side as their son was going through cancer. All of the support that they had gotten from family, from friends, from neighbours, from people that they had just known. The difficulty that it was for Rob to work while his son was going through cancer treatment, and how they basically just got each other through it. It's such a heartbreaking read. I listened to the audiobook of this and I was on a train with tears streaming down my face. And I don't often cry at books, so that's how you know it hits hard. In at number 8 is Business Casual by B.K. Borison. I actually finished off the entire series in 2024, so let's honorarily put the entire series on this list. I had such a great time with it. Something that I really love about Business Casual is that it really comes full circle for the entire series. In book 1, you're meeting Stella and Luca, and they're just starting their relationship together. And then a couple of years later, in book 4, you're actually attending their wedding. I absolutely adored that kind of full circle feeling, and it's definitely something I'm going to be checking out in other books. This is about Charlie and Nova. Charlie is Stella's brother, and he has been coming back and forth to Lingelwald because he's getting to know his sister a little bit better because they were separated as teenagers, but also because he just wants a little bit of a break from life in New York. He also meets Nova, who is a tattoo artist living in Inglewood, and they strike up a really beautiful relationship with one another. It starts out as a one-night stand, and then things start to grow a little bit further from there. I discussed this book with my friend Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, who had read the entire series as well, and she told me that the smut starts on page 90 and then it keeps going for about 30 pages or so. And as soon as she said that to me, I knew I was in. And I had such a great time with the smut in this book. I think they got progressively smuttier as the series went on, and this one was definitely a great icing on the cake. Something else that I really appreciated about this book, though, is the chronic illness and the mental health representation. Charlie has ADHD, and this is written so well in the pages of this book. And Nova suffers from migraines, and this is also written really well. I have only had a couple very, very mild instances of migraine across my entire life, but I feel like writing that aura that you get just before one is about to hit was written so fantastically in this book. The chemistry between Charlie and Nova as well, not just in a relationship but as friends, was so well written, and I bought into this series and the entire book so much. I know that BK Borison has got a couple of books coming out in 25 to 27, and these are all going to be based on Nora Ephron's 3 really big rom-coms, and I am so interested to see what she's going to be doing with those. In at number 6 is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This has something that I love in books so much, and that is a found family trope. This is about Mika, who is one of the only witches in the UK, and this is a very hush-hush and secret lifestyle. Nobody out there is to know that you have magical powers, but she has been making videos on YouTube that are kind of tongue-in-cheek referencing the fact that she's got a couple of magical powers. She's mainly doing it as kind of tarot, card reading things, but there are some people out there who are picking up on the hidden meaning. These people are the inhabitants of Nowhere House, which is a small little community of magical people, and they have just taken in 3 young orphans, and they need to kind of mold their magic. Every witch in this world is orphaned at birth or shortly afterwards, and there is nobody here to teach these 3 young women how to be witches and how to harness their magic and how to use it properly. They enlist the help of Mika, who is going to kind of train them in what it is that they need to do, how to hide their magic, and how best to use it. Mika really makes an impression with everybody in this house, except for Terracotta, the middle child, who just rebels against her the second that she sees her. But she most of all makes an impression with Jamie. He is the grumpy librarian that's living in Nowhere House, and he is adamant that she is not needed around Nowhere House until he starts to get to know her a little bit better. This had such a cozy and welcoming vibe to it, and it is definitely one that I'm going to be reading every single year. A Christmas Carol is my Christmas reread every single year, but I have a feeling that this is going to be my October Halloween spooky season revisit every single season. I absolutely loved this book. There was one qualm that I had with it, and it was that the sex scene that was in this book, about 60 or so % of the way, just felt a little bit clunky and unnecessary. But I ate this book up whole, and I cannot wait to revisit it already. Coming into the top 5, and in 5th place was Roleplay by Kathy Yardley. When I tell you that this book was absolutely everywhere in my friendship circle in the summer, I am not in any way kidding. This book is about Maggie and Aiden, or as they know each other, Bogwitch and Otter. Both of them are on a kind of an online RPG game, and they've only interacted with each other over chat. So they have no idea who the other one is in their actual real lives. Maggie thinks that Aiden is about 16 or 17 years old and still in high school, whereas Aiden thinks that Maggie is about 70 or 80 years old and just kind of getting to grips with playing video games. What it actually is that Maggie is about 48 and Aiden is 52 or 3. They are much closer in age than they imagine, and they get on like a house on fire. Sometimes they will have private gaming sessions when the rest of their group isn't available. Sometimes they will just text each other about how their days are going. And when they discover who the other actually is, sparks really start to fly between the two of them. What I loved most about this book is that it is a later in life romance. I don't read a whole lot of books with characters who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s looking to start in a new relationship, and I absolutely adored that. There is nobody saying that sexuality stops when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, so reading this situation was so wonderful to see. I also really loved the chemistry between Maggie and Aiden, even before they had known who the other was. They had such a great rapport with one another, they really respected one another, and I absolutely loved watching them build their trust with one another and building up their relationship, either platonic or romantic. Role-playing also features one of my favourite scenes written in a book, I think, ever. involving Maggie and Cheryl, who is Aiden's ex-girlfriend. And I absolutely loved the buzz that Maggie had during that episode. I thought it was so funny and so striking. And I absolutely loved that she stood up for Aiden in the way that she did. It's something that I still think about on a daily basis. And it involved the iconic line, "Hold my earrings." As soon as I read that, I knew I was in for good hands. I have a copy of Do Me a Favor on my Kindle by the same author, and I am so ready to go and check out more of Kathy Yardley's work. Just narrowly missing out on a podium place. In at number 4 is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This is the penultimate book in the series, and I have absolutely adored watching Nick and Charlie grow up and grow together. This book features quite a big rite of passage in a lot of young people's lives, and that is the decision of where to go for university. Nick, who has just finished his A-levels, is looking for where to go in the next step of his education, and there is a possibility that this is going to take him away from Charlie, who is a year younger than him and is still in school. I absolutely loved the discussion that the two of them have had about what's going to happen to their relationship and how they're going to get past this. And I think that it is something that so many young people are going to associate with. So many young people are in relationships when they go to university, and they have the same kind of worries and the same kind of stresses that Nick and Charlie do. It also has phenomenal mental health representation. It has phenomenal LGBT representation. And it is one of my favourite series to go back to time and time again. I know that the last book in the series is coming out at some stage in 2025, and I am bittersweet about it. I am so ready to find out what's going to happen to Nick and Charlie, but I am in no way prepared to say goodbye to these two boys. My third best book of the year was Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is one of my favourite celebrity memoirs that I've read across the entire year. It follows Fern, who is a Scottish comedian, and when she was an adult, she was diagnosed as autistic. She looks back over her entire life, her upbringing, her childhood, time in school, and realises how many things would have been easier to deal with and how many things would have gone differently had she already had this diagnosis in her back pocket. She talks about her family life growing up in a Catholic family in Scotland, and about all of the trials and the tribulations that they would have gone through, the hardships that they had suffered through, and also Fern's time in school, how she didn't really get along so well there, and the work that she had gone into when she was a young adult. There's also a really great discussion about sex work in this book, and that is something that I really appreciated. I think it was really important to have that no holds barred, this is what the world of sex work is actually like, account from somebody who has been through it and who has gone through it all. I really admire Fern as a person, and I really admire her as a comedian. There's so much humor in this book, but also so much of this story is quite harrowing to read. There are quite a lot of things that are very difficult that have happened throughout Fern's life, but I feel like she has really taken it all in the way that she can and has really come out as a strong female character on the other side. I have loved Fern even before I saw her on Taskmaster in the UK, and this just cemented her as one of my favourite comedians at the moment. In second place is a Christmas book, and that is Under the Mistletoe with You by Lizzie Huxley Jones. This is the second of their Christmas books, and it's a follow-up to Make You Mine This Christmas. We're following Christopher, whose best friend half and sister Kate we would have met in the first book. Christopher is living in the south of Wales, and he is looking forward to getting back home to his family for Christmas, except that there's a massive snowstorm. This has grounded flights, it's brought trains to a halt, and there is no way for Christopher to get back home. While he was planning to be away from the bakery that he has just opened up, he had actually rented out his room on Airbnb, and the person who had rented out this room was Nash. Nash is a huge Hollywood star, and he's had so many successful Netflix specials, but Christopher has to try and play it really cool and pretend that he has no idea who Nash is, despite having had a huge crush on Nash for the entirety of his career. I absolutely adored this book. I read it in the lead up to Christmas, and it just had such a cozy, Christmassy vibe to it. It also had a really nice community feel to it, in that everybody who was kind of trapped in Pennevar really got together, really got each other through it. They brought meals to the people who were struggling. They had constant town meetings to see how everybody was doing and what kind of supplies were needed more. And I absolutely loved just watching them all support one another. Throughout quite a lot of this book, everybody is getting ready for a big Christmas Day meal. And you can just see how everybody is like, oh, I've got really nice tablecloths, I'll bring these with me. Oh, I love to make this stuffing on Christmas Day, I'll bring a big batch of it for everybody to eat. I absolutely love that. That is one of the main meanings of Christmas to me, to just gather around with the people that you love, to share good food, to share good stories, and to just be together. So seeing that in the book was just phenomenal. This book also has really great LGBT representation. There's a character who you don't know their sexuality at the beginning of the book, and the reveal is just so mundane and it's just so everyday life. Nobody really bats any eyes to it. But also, Nash is a trans man, and this is never really made a big deal about it. Even when it is found out that Nash and Christopher has been getting to know one another, especially by the press, there's never any big, oh, it's a trans man and a cis man getting to know one another. It's just, this celebrity and this normal person have been hanging out, what does it mean? And that is something that I really loved reading. This is the third of Lizzie Huxley-Jones books that I have read, and they are truly cementing themselves as a must-read author at Christmas for me. I don't know if they have any plans to bring out any other Christmassy books, but as soon as it hits the shelves, I am all over it. And so here we are, the best book that I read in 2024, and this is the best example that I can give you of why reading is so subjective. As soon as I read this book, it went hurtling into the number one position, and it had not been knocked off at any other time of the year. I ate up whole You Deserve Good Gelato by Casey Rose. This is a very personal story to me because it is also written by somebody who has left their own country and gone to a completely different culture. Casey Rose is a huge star on TikTok. She does a lot of stories about assimilating into life in Italy, about learning the Italian language, about getting to know the cultures and the traditions in a new country that isn't really your own. And that is something that I, as a fellow immigrant, really connected with. Casey was brought up in the US and she moved to Italy about 6 or so years ago. So our timelines actually match up pretty well as well, because I have been in Germany for about 7.5 years now. So seeing somebody who was going through the same thing at the same time that I was going through it, just in a different location, was huge. She talks a lot about the language barrier, so going to the hospital, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, something that is quite challenging in your own language anyway, has that added pressure of a language barrier and trying to explain what it is that's going on with you, trying not to get any words wrong, trying to remember the grammar that you have to explain everything that's happening, and putting that added bit of pressure onto it. But of course, she also talks about the good parts of it, about those little language wins that you have, about assimilating into the country, about really opening your eyes to brand new cultures and brand new ways of living, and finding things that work for you in your new and adopted home. It's something that I have also been experiencing, especially in the last couple of years, having moved to different areas of Germany, and it is something that I am going to grasp onto. I haven't got a physical copy of this book, but I know that as soon as I see it out in the wild, I'm going to be picking one up, because this is one that I am going to cherish in my collection for years and years and years to come. There we have it, all 12 of the best books that I read in 2024. What was your book of the year in 2024? Why don't you leave a little case as to why we should read it in the comments below? And if you'd love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me a trophy emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.